not seen it before is blown away by it. And it's an album by the group Supertramp called Breakfast in America. This album was released in 1979, and the cover image has a scene from an aeroplane window coming in over the Manhattan skyline. And you can see the word Supertramp on the top of the horizon there, directly above the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, which of course was still standing in 1979. And somebody worked out that when you do a mirror image reversal of this particular sleeve design, something very interesting happens above the two World Trade Center towers. You now have what appears very much to be a 9 and an 11 directly above the two towers. And a couple of aspects worth bearing in mind is the fact that this is a view from an aeroplane window at breakfast time. And when did the events of September 11th happen? Sort of 8, 9 o'clock in the morning. So some interesting aspects there. How can this be? What kind of coincidental odds are we looking at here if there wasn't some kind of predictive element to what was going to come to pass 22 years later on the part of those that put this record sleeve together? Just as an interesting aside, the follow-up album to that Supertramp one was called Crime of the Century, and the image design, a bit difficult to see here, but you have these two hands clutching a cage or the railings of a prison cell, as if a connotation that you could put on it is that consciousness is being imprisoned eternally, and then the title of the album is Crime of the Century, which is some interesting symbolism and imagery going on. Anyway, staying with album sleeves and staying with aspects of things which are yet to happen being encoded into record sleeves before the event. Into the world of hip-hop, we have this album by Tupac, who, for this particular project, went under the alias of Machiavelli, and he put out an album called The Don Illuminati, which is some very interesting wording to get into. And this was released in 1996, a few months before Tupac was murdered, gunned down in a hail of bullets in Las Vegas when his car was stopped at a red light. Dozens upon dozens of witnesses in one of the busiest strips of one of the busiest cities in the United States, but they still can't seem to catch whoever did it all these years later. 6 months after the murder of Tupac, we had the murder in almost identical circumstances of the rap artist, the Notorious B.I.G., aka Biggie Smalls. This happened on the 9th of March, 1997. Today is the 9th of March, 2016, meaning it was exactly 19 years ago to the day. So I like to think there's some synchronistic significance to me doing this talk on the 9th of March of all dates, given that Biggie crops up in it. But anyway, a short while before Biggie was shot in a car, in a hail of bullets, in Los Angeles, in very much the same circumstances as Tupac, we had this album called Life After Death, in which he's pictured in a funeral suit, standing alongside a hearse, and the whole album just has this dark kind of death-related imagery to it. Biggie's first album was entitled Ready to Die. Then the one that appeared just a couple of weeks before his death was called Life After Death, and the posthumous album that was released a couple of years later was called Born Again. So you have all this life and death imagery associated with the album titles. And in the book, I quote the art director that was commissioned with putting this sleeve together. And he tells the story in an interview of how they'd come up with many different cover designs for this album. And a lot of them were very bright and optimistic in nature, focusing on the life bit as opposed to the death bit. And yet the one that was selected at the last minute, apparently by Puff Daddy, aka P. Diddy, who was Notorious B.I.G.'s producer and protege, was this one in a cemetery, which was very kind of dark and unsettling in its tone. And this came to be the one that was associated with the album. And many fans at the time found it very strange that this album seemed to be foreshadowing what was going to come in a couple of weeks. Was it random chance and accident that this album got put out when it did, or is there more to know about it? All throughout these subject areas, we're going back to the idea of placing things in plain sight and giving you indicators of what's really going on. One thing that, one of the earliest things I came to discover actually, which put me on the whole path to this whole world of research, was how many prominent contemporary music makers seem very fond of flashing up certain symbols and certain hand signs whenever there's a camera around. So we have this one, which appears often, and this is Beyonce at the US Super Bowl a few years ago, flashing up this hand signal that we see all the time. She's far from the only one to have done it. Going way back, we have a young Michael Jackson, who just happens to be flashing up the same symbol. And in this composite shot, we have a whole load of celebrities and so-called world leaders / puppets / manipulated stooges, all doing the same thing. So is this all coincidence? Is this all a way that people decide upon to look cool? The cover story for this sign and what it's supposed to mean, of course, is that it's supposed to mean, okay, everything's cool. So when you see people doing it in public, they would tell you that they're saying, yeah, all is cool, all is good. There's a few more doing it. But when you get into the true meaning of it, in terms of how it is employed within Satanism and dark occult secret societies, you come to realise that this is actually a depiction of a 6. And that it forms part of this number that crops up time and time again, 666. And it's a way of expressing that. This is a number that's very important to these dark occult priest class that control these industries. It's very much connected back to Saturn and the dark influences of the planet Saturn. And it feeds into base consciousness. It's also a number that is associated with base human consciousness, you know, cutting you off from your true spiritual nature and keeping you very much grounded in this material 3D reality. So it's a very important number to these occultists, and they feel the need to communicate it at all opportunities. Another way that it's been expressed in recent years is through the range of headphones that's come out courtesy of Dr. Dre, the hip-hop producer and rap artist. So he's got this range, Beats by Dre, and they've really taken the world by storm. They're like the #1 headphone brand out there. There's a real cachet of cool connected to them. Everyone's got to have a pair of Beats by Dre headphones. And the way that they're advertised is by what purports to be a B for Beats, and yet when you really get into it, the B can also be taken as a 6. And when you get the 3 lined up together in this advertising material, you realise that it's another expression of the same 666. There it is in plain sight for us all to see. This is another very recent one, so it's quite topical. It's a poster advertising the new single by Drake, the so-called rap artist out of Canada known as Drake. He's kind of hot with the kids right now. Not my idea of hip-hop, but you know, the kids seem to dig it. And we get 2 symbols for the price of 1 here, because you've got the same kind of hand signal going on, and inside it you've got an all-seeing eye, which is another one which tends to be fairly popular. So here we've got Beyonce and that is Jay-Z. Yeah, looks a bit like Little Wayne actually, but no, it is Jay-Z. Mr. and Mrs, of course, they've been put together as kind of an arranged relationship within the industry. They do this all the time. They put celebrities together, get them to marry, get them to go into relationships with each other. We see it all the time. We've had Rihanna with Chris Brown, we've had Jay-Z and Beyonce, of course, and Khalees with Nas, and so many other examples. Industry friends and industry relationships all the time. When you get to the upper levels of the industry machine and you become an owned commodity of these controllers, they don't want you mixing and mingling and circulating with ordinary people that can see through, you know, the truth of what's going on. They want to keep you in a closer circle, kind of like a cult, the way a cult community is managed. And so they pick your girlfriend and your boyfriend and your wife and all your friends. And that's why you see all these celebrities hanging out with each other and not with normal people outside of the industry. You get it in Hollywood as well, of course. Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman and so on. Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt, you know, all chosen for them. But anyway, here we've got Mr. and Mrs. Jay-Z flashing up a couple of favourite symbols. Beyonce's giving it the old 6 again, and Jay's doing this interesting thing with his hand. Not the only time we've seen that one. Here's Eminem giving a particularly sinister expression of the same hand signal. And here's our old mate, Anton LaVey, again of the Church of Satan, going right back to the 60s, giving it the same hand signal. And so the cover story for this one, when the thumb is extended outwards like this, it's supposed to be a kind of deaf sign language for I love you. And it's supposed to represent an I, an L, and a U. And as I say, the thumb has to be extended in order for it to make sense. But you'll notice that in these depictions of that symbol, the thumb is not extended outwards, and so you just have the 2 fingers up like this. And in fact, within these satanic circles and these dark occult organisations, this symbol is intended to depict Baphomet, this androgynous sort of demonic entity that has long been an emblem and a symbol of Satanism. So once again, it connects back to Satanism within the entertainment industry, and the question arises, why should these 2 areas have any connection whatsoever? Well, of course, those that are controlling and directing these industries, and so much more within human affairs, are very much steeped in satanic ritual and dark occult practices. That's the true nature of the industry when you really get down to it. And what they seem to be doing is, at any opportunity, they place their little calling cards and their little icons to let those with the eyes to see it know what's going on. So some people seem to think that the reason they're doing this is because it's a method of communication between members of these occult societies, so that they can recognise one of these symbols placed into a video or a promotional photo or whatever, and it's a way of them saying, this artist is down with the agenda, is part of the programme, is one of us. But other researchers think that something else is going on, that these symbols are designed to be absorbed by the subconscious mind of the general public that is viewing it. Symbolism resides within the subconscious mind, and the subliminal mind soaks up millions of pieces of information, most of it in symbolic form, every second. And only some very small part of what it soaks up is taken through into the conscious mind, where it can be logically analysed and studied and understood. And the rest of it just stays lodged away in the subconscious mind without the individual having any idea that it's there. And it's been shown by psychologists and many researchers into this area that the stuff that we absorb subconsciously can actually have an effect on our thoughts and emotions and actions and perceptions and the way we think about things and the way we see things. So what kind of effect could these symbols be having on the collective consciousness of the general public without them having any awareness of it? And could that be a reason as to why this stuff is put into music videos and such? Because when you get images like this out of a Rihanna video, this was to the song Umbrella, which was a massive #1 hit in 2007, you get these images flashed on screen for literally a fraction of a second, a split second. And so to get an image like this, you've got to study it online and be very quick with the pause button to be able to actually get a still of the image, because otherwise it's straight into the subliminal mind without you having any opportunity to realise it, and there it is, lodged away, having its effect, without the viewer having any idea of it. Here's Beyonce again in her guise as Sasha Fierce, which is this kind of alter ego that she's performed under, and she's wearing a dress with a kind of Baphomet design. In the book, I get into the whole world of mind control. MK Ultra, which is the big catch-all term for these many mind control programs, and specifically trauma-based mind control. And there are some derivatives of that known as monarch programming and also beta programming. and they feed very much into the entertainment industry as well. And it involves some very well-known, very prominent names who would appear to be a part of this very insidious, nefarious program. I don't have time to go into the detail in this talk. As I say, that's another minefield, rabbit hole of a subject that took a long time to research. But it does go some way to explaining why you get artists like Beyonce coming up with alter egos like Sasha Fierce, and Eminem being Slim Shady, and Jay-Z being known as Jehovah, and all this sort of stuff. All to do with alter egos and dissociative personalities. So talking of Jay-Z, here he is flashing up another very popular and very common hand signal that we've seen a lot of in recent years. And there's Beyonce doing it again. Do those two look like independent, creative, maverick artists expressing themselves in a spontaneous way and, you know, expressing their creativity? Or do they just look like pretty tragic, manipulated puppets doing the bidding of their controllers? I know the way they look to me. That does not look to me like true creative artists. And I think when it comes to A-list names at the very top of the industry, you have to go back a very long way to find that breed of artist. So Jay-Z, putting up this symbol, he has described it in the past as the rock sign. And there was an interview that he did in 2009, which used to be on YouTube, where he claims to have invented this symbol. And it's supposed to be a representation of his label, Rockefeller Records, interesting name, and it's supposed to represent the diamond. But unfortunately, Jay-Z didn't invent this symbol, and that interview from 2009 has disappeared from YouTube, so you can no longer see it. It does actually go back a lot further. Here's Kanye West, his best mate and collaborator and former producer, flashing up the same symbol. We also have some other connotations regarding trauma-based mind control in this picture, with this massive sort of teddy bear that stood next to him. Again, no time to go into these particular emblems in this talk, but it is detailed in the book, and that's a very interesting picture when you get into that whole area. And Kanye doesn't look too happy there to me, and again, it looks like he's doing that under duress rather than something that he feels the spontaneous need to do. So, of course, this symbol goes back a long way, a lot further than Jay-Z. Here's Anton LaVey again, of the Church of Satan. Why would I even be surprised by now? Doing the same symbol. It goes back a lot further than that as well. It's known as a triangle of manifestation. And the idea is that it represents the unity of mind, body, spirit, or thoughts, emotions, and action. And when you've got those three elements aligned in unity, in balance with each other, and when you imbue your intent and your will into it, you can actually bring about a physical manifestation of whatever it is that you desire. That's the idea behind it. It goes right back into many ancient civilizations in many cultures around the world, and you know, it's very far from a modern invention. And many of these symbols as well also tie into the Indian mudra system. You see many of those expressed within that particular system as well. And isn't it interesting that they've all been brought into the entertainment industry in one way or another? Here's another one of a young Michael Jackson, and he's giving just one of many ways of expressing one-eye symbolism that we see in photographs time and time again. This would have been several decades ago, of course. And what's he telling us to keep quiet about there, I wonder? Why the reason for the secrecy when it comes to Michael Jackson and what he would have been a part of as a young artist in this industry? So, when it comes to artists appearing with one eye covered, where do you want to start? Because pretty much every major household name artist at some point in the past few years has been pictured doing it. Again, there are people that will tell you it's just a coincidence. There are people that will say it's just a way of looking cool. Really? You know, again, the odds would be billions to one of all these artists just happening to do it, but some people still seem to want to go there. To me, it's pretty clear that something is being conveyed here, and the intention is to communicate this symbolism into the subconscious minds of the general public. When you get down to it, you realise that the eye symbol has been seen in many other places, most notably on the reverse of the US dollar bill, where we see it in the capstone of the pyramid, with all the kind of emblems and the slogans relating to the New World Order and all the rest of it. And tying back in, feeding back into this secret society network, which has the entertainment industry very much in its grip, as it does the world of politics and big business and every other aspect of human society. When you go far enough up the pyramid, to use that particular analogy, you realise that the controllers are the very same individuals and organisations that are pulling the strings of all these things. So yeah, placing the truth in plain sight. They've been doing so much of it in recent times. Again, all done subliminally. There's been a spate of music videos in recent times where the producers have felt the need to splice in split-second images of demonic entities. Here we've got a video from Lil Wayne for the song Love Me, and at the point where in the lyric he says, "These hoes love me like Satan, man," we get this split-second image of Wayne turning into this kind of demonic, otherworldly entity, and a girl next to him with a monarch butterfly covering one of her eyes. So 3 symbols for the price of one there. We're getting into monarch programming and mind control. We've got the one eye thing going on, and we've got Wayne turning into a demon. And there was a Robin Thicke video for the song Get Her Back, which came out recently. Robin Thicke is not necessarily an artist that you at first think of as being down with any kind of satanic agenda. But why is it then that in his song there is a split second where you get this horrific kind of demon-like entity looking like an archon or something popping up, in a scene in the video that's entirely unrelated to the lyrical content? We get the same in a Beyonce record as well, XO, in the video to that song. Split second of a demonic entity flashed into the subconscious mind of largely kids who are going to be watching this video. So what's that all about? Now there's another very interesting way in which the truth about things seems to be encoded into music and in other areas. And this really is a fascinating one. And it's slightly different to the others. And we're getting into the realms of what's known in music circles as backmasking. And it's the idea that there are subliminal messages built into certain audio recordings that can only be understood and interpreted when the recording is played backwards. So when the recording is played forwards, you hear a certain lyric and it sounds straightforward and innocent. And it's only when you play the record backwards that you discover something more kind of unsettling. And the idea that this has been going on within music has been around for decades. It's very much associated with the heavy metal and heavy rock industries. And they're said to be laden with all these messages. And the Beatles have admitted, John Lennon particularly in interviews, has admitted many times that the Beatles' music is absolutely full of subliminal messages in this way. And probably the most famous song which is alleged to contain this would be Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin, back to our old mate Jimmy Page. And there's a certain phrase within that song which is said to contain a very dark kind of message when it's played backwards. I've not done this in a talk before, but I'm going to attempt to play you a piece of that song. I think we can do this. I'm going to play you a phrase from Stairway to Heaven, the famous rock classic by Led Zeppelin. This is what it sounds like when you play it ordinarily.
Yes, there are 2 paths you can go by, but in the long run, there's still time to change the road you're on.
Okay, so forwards, the lyric says, yes, there are 2 paths you can go by, but in the long run, there's still time to change the road you're on. And I love that phrase, and I've actually used it as an inspirational kind of uplifting thing at the end of the book. But when you play that particular phrase backwards, it sounds like this. Play it again. anyone hear anything in that?
Here's to my sweet Satan.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like, isn't it? Once more. So it's long gone down in sort of rock music lore that the phrase "Here's to my sweet Satan" is encoded within that recording. I'm going to give you another example, a more recent one, and I often tell an anecdote about this. I won't today because we're short on time, but it's in the book. This is a record by Madonna, often referred to as the high priestess of the entertainment industry in terms of some of the rituals that she's been involved with. But anyway, this is the song "Justify My Love" from 1990, and this is the way it sounds ordinarily.
To justify my love, rain. To justify my love. To justify my love, I'm open. To justify my love.
Okay, so that particular phrase reversed sounds like this. It's a quiet start. Did you hear anything in that one? Maybe a bit more difficult. Did anyone hear "I Love Satan"?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what it sounds like to me. Let's just get back into the images. Oh, my bloody images have crashed now. That's a good sign. Well, while I'm stalling for time, I'll mention the anecdote that I ordinarily do. When I first came across that Madonna record and the message that it allegedly contains, I put it onto a reel of tape. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning in a radio studio, and I tried this thing out and recorded it onto a reel of tape. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, it chilled me to the bone to hear what I thought I'd just heard. And so I went next door in the radio studio to speak to the DJ that was on air at the time. And I said, "You've got to come and listen to this, it's just incredible." And when I took him back into the next door studio to play him what I'd found, it had completely disappeared from the tape. It was nowhere to be heard. And it's interesting that my slides have crashed at that precise moment here. History repeating itself 26 years on. Let's try and get back into it. Bit of a slow one, let's bear with me. Can't really do it without the images, so we have to have them. We'll edit that bit out of the video. Yep, so we're up to here. Led Zeppelin, Madonna. Now, a lot of people hearing what I've just played will probably say, it's all a load of bollocks. They'll say, you can hear anything you want to hear, and if you set out to hear an alleged satanic message in a song, you will make yourself hear it by stretching, what you actually hear. It's a viewpoint, it's a way of looking at the situation, but something that really blew my mind when I came across it a couple of years ago was the phenomenon of reverse speech therapy. There's this guy in Australia by the name of David John Oates, and in 1983 he accidentally dropped a dictation machine in the toilet, and from that point it would only play backwards. And so he started playing these tapes, and it sounded like gibberish because it was dialogue coming out in reverse. But after listening to a few of them, he came to realise that he was hearing messages in reverse encoded into this speech that was recorded onto the tapes. And so for the past 30 odd years, he's been running kind of counselling courses known under this banner of reverse speech therapy. And the science behind it says that our true motives and our true thoughts and what lies at the core of our being and what's important to us is there in the subconscious mind. And it can actually express itself and come out through our speech in reverse form without us being aware that it's going on. There's another practitioner of this process by the name of John Kelly in Canada, and he runs a company called yourinnervoice.com. And he did an interview on Red Ice Radio a few years ago where he actually played some examples of where he'd got people who have come into his office and they've got issues that they want to work through in their lives, you know, deep trauma and problems that they want to talk through. And what these guys do is they get these people to talk at length about whatever they want. It's not important what the subject is, but they just record large portions of them talking. Then they flip the tapes around in reverse and listen back to it and try and decipher the hidden messages. And John Kelly gave this example of this woman who all through her life has carried this guilt of the fact that when she was little, she was holding the hand of her little brother when they were waiting to cross a road. And the little brother ran out into the road and, you know, she lost the grip of his hand and he was knocked down by a car and killed. And she's carried that trauma and that guilt around with her all through her life. And he gives this example of where she was talking about this in this counselling session. And when he played the tape in reverse, in amongst what sounds like a whole bunch of gibberish, you hear the phrase, "better hold on to him." And so the idea is that in our reverse speech, those things that really lie at the core of our psyche and that, you know, are really important to us can be expressed in this way. So is it possible then that this is something that could also be happening in music? So you get instances where the likes of John Lennon have said that the Beatles deliberately put reverse messages into their music. So it was a prank. It was just a way of them having some fun and seeing who would spot it. But there's also the possibility that in other cases, music makers could be expressing themselves in their music, and maybe this same phenomenon of reverse speech programming is coming through in some of the lyrics. And so if you're an act that is immersed in dark occult activity and, you know, satanic rituals and such, maybe certain aspects of what you're into can come through expressing themselves in reverse form in lyrics without you necessarily being aware of the fact that it's going on. So maybe the Led Zeppelin and the Madonna examples would be instances of that. It's very interesting going back to Aleister Crowley again, who pops up all over the place, that one of the instructions to the initiates of in his book of magic, his famous work, where he's talking about these various processes that initiates are required to go through in order to proceed through the ranks. He talks about people training themselves to speak in reverse and to listen to speech in reverse. And one of his central tenets is let the initiate train himself to listen to phonograph records reversed. So way back decades ago, you had Crowley teaching his followers to train themselves to listen to music in this way. So to anyone that thinks reverse messages in music is a load of bollocks, I would point them towards that and invite them to consider what he had to say about it. We'll whiz very quickly through this section because this is getting into trauma-based mind control and MKUltra and such. To do this subject proper justice, again, you probably need an all-dayer. But people might be familiar with the overall concept, which is that many favourite artists, household names, have actually been subjected to horrific traumatic abuse under the overall umbrella of what's known as MK Ultra mind control, and more specifically monarch programming, which is this method which causes the victim to kind of dissociate from reality and create different personas within their mind that can be brought forward at will. It's the sort of thing that you saw in the movie The Manchurian Candidate, and there's elements of it in the Bourne movies with Matt Damon as well, where he's obviously a mind-controlled subject in much the same way as many celebrities are. So we had this famous incident a few years ago where Britney Spears went a bit crazy and shaved her head and started attacking cars with umbrellas. And then when you get into some of the interesting symbolism that's been portrayed with regards to Britney and so many other artists, you come across this: Mickey Mouse ears. Seems a ridiculous thing for celebrities to be posing in. So Britney came out of the Mickey Mouse Club, part of the Disney Corporation, in the same year as Justin Timberlake and Christina Aguilera. They were all they were all child stars within Disney, and then a few years later they become leading pop stars of their generation. Taking it back over to this side of the Atlantic, not many British artists where you see indicators of them being part of the same agenda, but here's Jessie J, pictured posing with the same sort of Mickey Mouse ears, and we've got some interesting black and white duality, polarity symbolism going on there as well. Marilyn Manson, as we mentioned, was a priest within the Church of Satan. Here he is with Mickey Mouse ears. And here's Aleister Crowley on a sleeve from Eddie and the Hot Rods, pictured with Mickey Mouse ears. It's all pertaining to mind control. And this particular song was called Do Anything You Want to Do, which seems to tie into the central tenet of Crowley's Do What Thou Wilt. So some interesting stuff going on there. Fritz Springmeier is an author and counsellor and researcher that's done a lot of work into trauma-based mind control, and he's worked with victims that have come out of that, survivors. And he's unveiled a lot of the tactics that are used and a lot of the symbolism that is placed right there in plain sight to give us an indicator that certain individuals are under the effects of trauma-based mind control. I mean, how blatant do you want it? Nicki Minaj. Dolls, and specifically Barbie dolls and dolls with pink hair, are a symbol that comes up time and time again when you get into the realms of modern programming. The victims are often referred to as dolls because they've kind of dissociated from reality, which is exactly what she appears to have done. And Nicki Minaj famously has these different personas and these different alter egos that she goes into in interviews. One of them was called Roman Zolansky, where she would start speaking in this strange voice and this strange accent in interviews. And a few years ago, she publicly exorcised this Roman Zelensky character from her at the Super Bowl ceremony. So they really are putting it right out there in plain sight, because many of these Grammy events and Super Bowl and MTV Music Awards are blatant occult rituals full of Freemasonic imagery and other kind of esoteric and occult imagery, and they really are putting it right in your face these days. And it's getting to the point where you have to be blind or half asleep or in very heavy denial not to recognise that it's going on. So Nicki Minaj put out this song called Out of My Head a few years ago, where she's pictured in a straitjacket in some kind of mental institution. So again, how blatant do you want it? Mariah Carey, there was this story a few years ago where she was reported to have suffered a nervous breakdown and attempted suicide. And then you come to realise that in one of her album sleeves she was pictured with a monarch butterfly. Just a coincidence. And here's will.i.am, who's very much a part of the transhumanist agenda that's being rolled out through music as well. I'll go into that in the book, there's a whole chapter on it, not time to do it justice in this talk. But what we see here is yet another manipulated stooge doing the bidding of those that control him. Got a pyramid going on, he's holding a monarch butterfly, he looks like a bloody robot. It's all there. Robin Thicke, who we mentioned earlier, in combination with Miley Cyrus, in another ritual. Taking it way back, more emblems pertaining to trauma-based mind control here with Syd Barrett, the original frontman of Pink Floyd. He's looking in a mirror, there's teddy bears around. When you get teddy bears and dolls, and particularly those with mutilated limbs, those are also symbols of childhood satanic ritual abuse. And, you know, the broken limbs of the doll and the teddy bear are supposed to represent the innocence and the purity of childhood having been debased and corrupted by these horrific things that these children go through. And Sid Barrett's father, it turns out, was heavily connected to Cambridge University, and he was involved in research for various governmental institutions there. So we have yet another connection between a prominent music artist and